What's up? We are back. Another episode Behind the Wheel podcast, joined with Scott. Scott, what's up, man?
What's up?
How are you?
Good.
All right, this is off to a good start. We are joined today with the technical field manager, and business development from Toyo Tires, Cameron Parsons. So we're really excited to have you here, Cameron. How are you?
How's it going? Good to be here.
Awesome. So I think today we're talking a little bit of some track tire stuff, some on track.
It's fitting. I mean, we're getting into that race season window, and we got so many questions when it comes down to wheels and tires, and we always end up taking I don't want to say take the fifth on tires, but we try to stay in our lane a little bit. And I think with a lot of the people, they ask us questions about choosing the right tire, or maybe trying to pick a tire that's best for their setup. It borderlines with wheels. It complements wheels. There's a supplemental element to it, but there is a very large departure from choosing a tire versus choosing a wheel.
Yeah, it's a very tricky subject because there's all kinds of science behind them. There are technical hard facts, but at the same time, like, people probably hate me for it, but one of my favorite answers for all these kinds of questions are just it depends. There's so many variables involved with tires, and especially in the track environment. Yeah. It just all depends on what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, the good news is that if you say that that's your answer, then my answer has been right, because I say it depends pretty much almost every other time. I think the interesting point, though, is there's probably some more novice type questions that we can lead into, which will probably lead us into some other, rabbit holes that will kind of allow us to go a little bit further into some of these subjects. But, one of the biggest things that we hear all the time is, I'm going out on track. So as soon as I hear I'm going out on track, the first thing I know right away is this is a person that doesn't have a lot of track experience, right? So usually when I hear is I'm going out on track, I think of it more in like I'm going to experience an HPDE. I'm going to, go out. I'm getting my feet wet in track, or they're hinting at the fact that they want a performance-oriented experience, but maybe they're never really going to get on track. They're just saying we're going on track.
My favorite one, just cutting in on that real quick, is I do lots of races and track days, almost every weekend of the year, it seems. And a common one I hear at HPDs and track days is people saying, I'm going racing. Right. Oh, right. They say, they'll come up and they'll look at the schedule. When's the next race? And we're like, there's no racing today. It's just an HPD.
Right. Yeah. Well, look, I think being at the track makes you feel that there's something going on, but and to give people a little bit more into your background, first off, they can go find you on most of the social elements that come along with it. We'll link that down below as well. But you've done professional racing from the aspects of anything from IMSA. You did Mazda Spec Mazda, right?
Actually, that was a fun joint project with Mazda when I was working at D Sport Magazine. I got to race their MX-5 Cup car in the World Challenge Series. Yeah. Nice.
And you also run a TA2 program.
Yeah. So what was it? Starting in, I think, 2019, I sold like everything I had to get a TA2 car.
Because super expensive.
And they've gotten more expensive. Right. I mean, it's still, Trans Am is still really cool because it's still one of the best bang for the buck series, like in the pro circuits that you can get. Yeah. But that doesn't change the fact that it's still expensive. Right. But yeah, I ran a TA2 class Camaro on the West Coast Championship for a couple of years. Got Rookie of the Year in 2020. And actually sold that car just recently because I'm about to pursue a new project that will be announced in a month or two.
Ooh, can't wait to hear that.
Yeah,
we were a month shy of being.
Yeah, we were really close.
Exclusive crap.
If you want to be back on here later,
if you want to spill the beans now, go ahead.
Right, we'll bring the exclusivity.
Yeah.
But so for these people that are ending up in going on track for their first time, and when I say that, I mean, look, they maybe, let's say they bought, if they're smart, right? They bought a set of Flowform wheels, right? Or a budget conscious, affordable set of wheels that give them some performance, lower weight, stuff like that. Now, they're going on track. Look, I mean, there's what kind of things are is somebody that's going to, let's start with a person that's going to drive their car to the track run on the track, drive their car home? What kind of things are they looking for what tire they should be pairing with, their wheels?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you mentioned the budget aspect because, I help run a bunch of track day events throughout a year too. So I see like all the common mistakes and problems, and one of the biggest mistakes people make is outspending their ability, but also outspending just what they want to actually do with the car.
Yeah.
You don't know what you're doing with it or what limits you're pushing here and there until you actually get yourself out there. So one of the biggest things is just, I mean, one, make sure your car is safe to drive. It's, everything is bolted and nutted down as it should be. But aside from that, I usually recommend people like don't touch the car, take it out there stock. Are the tires that are on the car in good condition? Then take the stock tires out. Your first time out, equipment is not going to be your limit. So you don't bother going out with slicks or a crazy R compound. Yeah. Go out there with a stock setup and see what you need from there and build as you go.
What are some things, I think for anybody that's been on track, they're probably yelling at the screen right now, like, who cares? Do we know this? But let's say, so let's walk through the process, right? So we come from the area. We've now taken, let's say we've taken a car that's come from the factory with not a shabby, nothing super high ultra performance summer oriented, but let's say something that's all season, but a little bit more of a performance all season tire. So that came on my car. I go to the track. What are the things and the signs that I'm looking for where I'm like, I'm on track, and as I'm using the car, I'm realizing this is where if I would have upgraded my tires, I would have had a much better feel for things?
Yeah, one of the advantages with going with a, I guess, tamer, for lack of a better term, tire onto the track, as opposed to something more race ready or track oriented, is that all seasons and all season UHPs are easier to control.
Okay.
Their wear rates are a little bit higher, so usually they don't stick as hard, which means they don't let go or snap out on you as quickly. Right. So it's great to start at this point because of just the controllability aspect. But if you start running into the point where you're overheating the tire and it starts falling apart in whatever way, or you see weird signs of just odd degradation or chunks coming off or something, then now you've probably hit that point where it's building up too much heat for what it's designed for, and that might be an indicator to upgrade to something a little bit more aggressive. But for anybody that's going out to the track, I was going to say for the first time, but across the board, like your primary interest should be the safety aspect of just putting in enough air for what you're throwing at it. A common misconception people have is just dropping the pressure to crazy low amounts because they think it's going to grip better. But that's not the case, because inflation pressure inside that air chamber of the tire, that is kind of part of the structure, right? That tire is built to hold your car up so that you're not dragging wheels on the ground. So ensuring that you're putting in enough pressure with the load rating of the tire and how much weight of a car that you're driving on track, that should be number one priority. It's just making sure it has enough air. And lots of these charts and tables you can find online just based on, okay, what's the load rating of the tire? How much pressure is needed to hold so many pounds? And it kind of scales up and up and up with what, you can calculate out to be safe for your car.
Yeah. It's interesting because, we do a lot of preaching about proper inflation pressure. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that, we preach that the air that's in that tire is actually the cushion that's kind of keeping everything within check within the wheel, right? And a lot of damage prevention, or making sure that you're running your wheel safely, is by making sure that you're properly inflated, because so much of what happens is that cushion is what's meant to absorb a lot of that shock within the tire. And then all of a sudden you take that inflation away, and now people are like, well, I don't understand. Why did I get that? Why did my wheel bend and my tire was still there? Or, and we see this a lot with people that stretch tires or run the improper tire size for the wheel or whatever it may be. which is a lot of the reason that we go back to when people say, what size tire should I run? The answer is, well, you got to have the correct overall rolling diameter, and you need to make sure that whatever you're putting on the wheel that you're choosing falls within the approved rim width that these tire companies are stating this model and this size tire falls in. So, same type of thing. But an interesting piece is, we talk about air pressure, and there is that big misconception, and I'll let you speak to it in a second, about lowering the air pressure gets me more traction.
Yeah. I was always under the impression that people deflate their tires a bit because they anticipate that the air pressure, the PSI is going to rise when you're on track,
and that happens as air heats up, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's a point where it kind of does taper off. I mean, it's not like.
And then to second that, not to play devil's advocate or anything, but I also was under the impression that, especially for something like drag racing, people wanted that lower PSI for grip.
Different circumstance.
Okay, yeah. So go on.
Can you speak
so here you go. It depends. Yeah, I mean, because there are some cases where people do want to deflate their pressures to uncomfortably low amounts, like if you're going on the trail or soft roading or something like that. But in a track application, you're putting multiple laps down on a tire at a time. You're running it hard, you're driving it hard, and it might be happening for 20 minutes, half hour, if you're racing endurance, 2 hours or 4 hours or something like that. So the thing is, yes, you do typically lower the pressures because there's going to be a pressure gain as the tire heats up. And the more it swells and the more pressure that builds up, the more heat it's going to build, and you're trying to be cautious not to overheat the tire with too high of a pressure. So that is like the main reason that we're deflating. The thing is, you don't want to deflate to excess. And I tell you, the pyrometer is like number one tool that every track person should have, and less than 5% probably show up to a track with a pyrometer.
Right.
But this can tell you so many things about what's happening on your tire. Because what you should be doing when you're trying to figure out and dial in your setup is, do a few hard laps, come into pit lane with the car and tires still hot, and check outside, middle, inside of every single tire and see what that temperature swing is like from the inside to the outside. So when we're talking about deflating, a common thing that happens if you're running too low of a pressure is that your the sides of the tread section are high on temperature, and the middle is lower than the sides. And what's happening is that, you might have a little bit of a concave there, but the thing is, you're building up all that temperature on the shoulders and sides of the tire with all that flex and lateral force that you're putting up against it. And the tire is kind of just, flexing and moving around when you're going around corners. And so, you lower the pressure, the tire is softer and conforming more to changes, but you're building up heat and temperature in all the wrong places. You don't want to build that excess heat in the sidewall. That stuff is just there to provide structure and hold the car up. And so, that's definitely a big misconception. You're building temperature in the wrong spots and potentially damaging your tire if you're going out with too low of a pressure.
Right. So kind of returning to our fake scenario here. So we've been on the track. Let's say we've gone out with our OE tire. Let's say the tire is not a piece of garbage, right? It's a decent tire. We've gotten to a point now where we've run the tire and we're starting to feel some things, right? We're starting to feel that maybe I don't have as much response as I was hoping for, or maybe you're starting to see some, I don't want to say traction issues, it's too big of a word, but you know what I mean, that you're not getting the right grip for what you're looking for. Is there something that's going to now come into the process when I go back to the track a second time that I maybe should think about if I have the expendable budget to upgrade a tire?
Yeah. If you find yourself tire limited, still you want to take small bites at a time with any change that you make on your car. If you're out there in a 125 horsepower Miata and you decide, okay, I'm good, time to LS swap this thing and see what happens.
Yeah.
Uh, you don't want to jump straight from an all season to a slick. And the most commonly used tire that's on track is going to be, I would say, a 200 UTQG, a 200 tread wear tire, and that's where most people end up. But what's weird is that category covers a broad spectrum of performance. I would say, ask around, check the paddock, see what people run, because you've got a 200 tread wear that is great for time attack, and it's good for like 5 laps, and then it burns off, and you're never going to get that lap time again. Whereas you have other 200 tread wear tires that are more endurance oriented, and they might be 3 seconds a lap slower than the top winner there, but it's going to last you a lot longer and fit in more with your driving capability and help you learn a little more as you kind of gradually step up.
It's interesting because before you mentioned about even like some of the snap steer and some of the harshness that a tire, when you go to an aggressive tire, can kind of accompany with, and so if but now in the same respect, you're talking about somebody that's got to make a decision, and it seems like even within that same 200 tread wear type category, there is a large difference between maybe how the tire is going to respond, but basically also, when you make that choice to buy a tire, is there something there as far as a consideration, which I don't think anybody really talks about, but like if you're on a budget, like some of these tires, even though they're still 200 tread wear, they're going to last longer or not as long as other tires, right?
Yeah, it's funny how it works. I think most people know that the tread wear rating system in the US is pretty arbitrary. Depends on what manufacturer you go to. There's some manufacturers that make multiple 200 tread wear category tires that perform very differently from each other. So yeah, it's absolutely the case to like walk around the paddock, check out the forums, see what people are running, because there's a lot of talk and chatter out there for what tires are good for what purpose.
Right.
I mean, on the Toyo side, lots of our stuff, I think is a little bit more enthusiast, club racer, or track day oriented versus like the all out, time attack, fastest time, or pro racing, world challenge, IMSA circuit kind of stuff. The R1R that we have is a street tire that you can take on the track. It's got great water channeling and everything, so you can put it on your daily. It's quiet enough. The R888R is a little bit noisier, but it's also a little bit more aggressive with a little bit more of a contact patch. So it's like there are categories all over the place that you can choose for, but it's all going to be exchanges. What am I going to sacrifice for this or that?
Yeah, no, and I know that like just in kind of talk with other people and in different racers that that I know or whatever it may be, it seems like Toyo's position in a lot of the tires, especially in the I don't want to say mid-range performance, but not the most extreme performance tire, is that they're really known for having this durability and lasting a long time. And so there is that idea that maybe if how do you use the tire? When you buy this tire, what's your functionality? What's your use going to be? Because like you said, it's very different if you're choosing a tire that you're looking like you only need to make 2 laps with or 3 laps, or you only have to race a certain period of time versus, hey, I got these tires. I want to be able to use them, drive home. I maybe want to get another track session out of them. Some of these tires will last longer, may not be the fastest tire, but also will give you much more racing than some of the others, right?
Yeah, I mean, you make me think a little bit of how this whole wave of 200 treadwear popularity has improved and ruined the sport at the same time.
Okay.
It's the concept is great to make racing more affordable, which is why I think we've seen endurance racing pick up so much too.
Right.
People are looking for ways to get more bang for the buck. And 200 treadwear seems like a great balance for that, right? It's not a full-on slick racing tire, but it's still aggressive enough to hold itself together on the track and not burn itself out like an all-season might. On the downside of that, 2 downsides, 200 treadwear, it being an arbitrary factor, there are some tires out there that are nearly as fast as a racing slick, and you just
Yeah.
kind of go like, that doesn't seem like a 200 tread wear. And so now some series are banning specific tires. They used to have a rule to try and control costs to say 200 tread wear, anything that's 200 UTQG or higher, you can run. But now some tires are, walking that line so strangely, where they just now have to pick and choose which tires specifically are allowed. So it's gotten real competitive. And on top of that, some series are, or some people, I guess, get kind of too hung up on the 200 tread wear category. It is a great solution, but it's still not a catch-all for everything, because some cars do need a more aggressive or stickier tire than that. So, I would be reluctant to jump into a Porsche GT3 Cup Series if they said, okay, well, to keep things affordable, we're going to have a 200 tread wear rule, right?
Okay,
Those cars are going to be all over the place, and you're going to be slamming doors against each other nonstop. Like, those cars need more tire than that.
Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah, it's like the 200 tread wear is most popular for the track, but it's also because cars that take advantage of it are the most popular cars you see at the track. But if you go with something more aggressive or heavier or more powerful, Corvettes, supercharged Camaros, some of the BMW M models, like, yeah, you might be holding yourself back a little bit with the 200 tread wear. And in some cases, depending on the car and driver, you might find it a little bit easier to drive with a 100 tread wear or a semi-slick of some sort.
Just because of the grip?
Yeah, because as great as 200 is for affordability, you put it on the wrong car and you might be driving a handful, and you might even be wearing it down quicker because it's never hooking up to the road, and you're spending all your time sliding and spinning tires.
Right. So there's this balance between, adhesion and traction almost. Like, you want to make sure that you're kind of maximizing that, where you could go in either direction, right? You could not have enough tire and then burn the tire out because you're obviously spinning it more, right? We're not getting that traction. And in the same respect, you could pick a tire that's just way too much for the car or whatever racing you're doing.
Yeah, actually, that's one that doesn't get talked about enough either, is to kind of over grip the car, over tire the car. Just using examples for extremes, but like, I would not take a stock Miata and throw 275 with slick tires on the thing.
Yeah.
when you're driving around a track, you really want some rotation to happen, right? So it's like, yeah, you turn the steering wheel and the front end points where you want it to go, but there is some extent that you want the back end to slide just a little bit. You don't want to drift, you don't want to be counter steering, but if the corrections are like, minimal and center wheel while the car is still center on the steering wheel, while the car is still kind of turning itself around a corner, like, that's the sweet spot to be. And so if you throw too much grip at the car and it never allows itself to get unstuck at all, you're probably costing yourself in lap times.
That's interesting. Do you mentioned it before, but I mean, obviously this definitely qualifies, but when it comes down to, maybe, I think that there is that common misconception about you can't put too of an aggressive tire. The worst that can happen is you just have so much grip, right? But like, what are some of the things that come, what are those harshnesses, what are those disadvantages that come to a driver? Maybe not as experienced, but they over tire the car, or they put something on there that's just far too, I don't want to say soft, but just too much tire for the car. What are some of the things that happen to them in the cockpit that they may experience?
Well, one actually I didn't mention is just heat and building temperature in the tire. So, a lot of, especially racing slicks, they're designed to run around 180, 200 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
And so if you put too large of a tire or too sticky of a tire, too aggressive of a race compound tire, on too lightweight of a car, it might feel crappy on track because it never actually builds up enough temperature to activate that compound to get it sticky.
Yeah.
So from the driver perspective, they might kind of feel like, just the tire never really came in. It just felt bad from start to finish. And because just the tire never got up to temperature for them.
Do you, back with your example of like the Miata or something like that, do you also think there's a little bit of a misconception on where people maybe want or desire kind of like a wider wheel and tire setup for work track use, for contact patch or something like that, and then maybe they don't take in consideration, I don't know, something as simple as just extra weight per corner? I mean, if you go up to a wheel or tire that's too bigger than the car was initially able to have, or it came with a 195 or whatever it may be, and then maybe you add 4 pounds a corner, I mean, does that even make enough difference for where people are going to see impact on their lap times?
Yeah, this one comes up a lot, and like for an example, one of my toys is a Mazda RX-8 that I like to track.
Awesome.
And that car, is about 220, 230 horsepower and like 7 pound-feet of torque, right? So it does not have enough to spin a lot of weight out there. And so weight is absolutely a consideration, because it's partially for the unsprung mass element, how much work your suspension is doing and how much extra it's having to do to compensate for giant 19s with a 325 tire or something like that. So yeah, on my car it came with stock 18-inch wheels, and I forget what width, but a common thing for RX-8 owners that I did on my car too was I actually downsized it. I brought it down to a 17-inch, and it's a 255 4017, which honestly is still too much tire for that car. But it's two components to it: is how much work are you forcing the brakes and suspension to do with what weight you're hanging on those outside corners, and then how much are you making that engine work to try and spin up those wheels and tires too. And so especially for low torque cars, that's definitely a consideration. You might sacrifice a little bit in looks. I don't know. I think 17 still look cool on lots of these cars, but you downsize it a little bit, less rotational mass for the whole drivetrain and engine to fight against.
Yeah.
Do you ever see people trying to use their wheel and tire package as a way of kind of dialing in the handling characteristics of the car? Like, for example, I've heard this disclaimer before and we get the question quite a bit in a lot of different live streams, where people will say like, hey, I'm not really sure, let's say it's a Miata or something to that effect, and they'll say, hey, what's faster? Is it faster if I run a 15-inch wheel, or maybe a 16-inch wheel, or 17-inch wheel? And we can go through the process of weight, right? Like that's obviously an underlying factor, but is there a difference when people start to choose a tire size, about the diameter that they're choosing? We know that the overall rolling diameter is supposed to remain the same, but maybe sidewall, the sidewall profiles, like how much cushion's there, how much they can, put into a tire. Is there something there that has to do with diameter and speed?
Yeah, because it affects your gearing ratio, right? So part of it is how much acceleration and top speed you're getting out of it, just considering what you've done to the drivetrain. So yeah, it's like, how much acceleration are you going to get? How much speed are you going to sacrifice if you're not changing gear ratios? And also, just kind of a funny one is like, for if you're doing time attack and you're building your car all around one track, or you have a local track that you go to and you don't go anywhere else, how might it affect your shift points? Because it can do that as well, where it's like, oh shoot, I keep having to shift in a fourth for like just a second before I have to downshift again for this corner. And so, check your data, check your lap times. If it's hurting you, maybe it's better to go up or down in size just because of that, 1 or 2 corners.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's like, the way I usually end up having to comment on the question has, I said, look, I can't really talk about it from a tire size, but from a wheel perspective, you run into these things where there's always going to be pros and cons to each way, right? Like a smaller wheel, generally you're going to be able to turn it a little bit quicker because of maybe a little bit lower weight. So, you may feel like the car's a little bit more snappy or off the throttle, but in the same respect, if you're not using a type of racing that requires this massive acceleration, then it doesn't matter as much. And now you're better off making sure that you're picking a wheel size that's giving you the best tire selection for the racing you're doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good point, because I see that a lot with people asking about what wheel size should I get, what tire should I get, and then I also get people that say just hey, I built the car around this size. What do you guys offer?
Oof.
And how often it sucks being at a
Yeah.
SEMA
I
or
hate
PRI
I hate
show.
that one.
Yeah. And just being like, sorry, man, you got like one choice, this one manufacturer, and nobody else makes it, so you don't have options. Or,
Yeah.
we get it especially with vintage, with people running ultra wides on 13s. And it's like, how much do you want to, make your car in the spirit of the original or the spirit of whatever aesthetic you wanted, versus how functional and affordable do you want that car to be?
Yeah.
Because some of those specialty sizes, you could be paying $800, $1,000 a
yeah.
tire. It's crazy. Whereas like if you just went up an inch, or if you just narrowed up your tire 20 millimeters, now you've got all kinds of options.
Right.
So I do recommend to lots of people, when they say, hey, I'm building a track car, I'm building a race car, or whatever, like do some shopping, check all the major manufacturers for whatever category you're going to run, and find like whatever sizes have the most overlap between them all. Go with what's available, because that's going to just impact you so much down the road.
I know from a gearing aspect, like this is to me where it would become the most logical sense, but like from a perspective of choosing the right wheel and tire combination for a street application or an application that will be used on the street, we're always preaching you got to keep the same overall rolling diameter, because that is obviously what your car's been geared to. That's obviously what, vehicle stability systems, traction control systems, all those systems are expecting to see. That's circumference. But from a racing aspect, let's talk about more of a race only or race dedicated vehicle. Does it matter at that stage? Are there advantages, like you said? Like, I mean, I know there's a gearing thing, which is the most obvious, but to exceeding that overall rolling diameter that maybe that was geared from the factory, is it not really a concern? Do they go by tire size? Like, how does that overall rolling diameter actually play into, for, let's say, a race vehicle?
I have to think if there are any exceptions I need to watch out for.
Yeah, I know. We run into that all the time. Because it's like, there's always that one situation that somebody's going to comment and bite you.
Because I want to say, like, if it's not going to freak out the computer systems, and if it's not going to hurt your drivetrain, like an all-wheel drive system.
Yep.
I'm trying to think. If it's not for either of those scenarios, I don't think it matters all that much.
Okay.
To go wildly off, and I believe we do it often with cars that we've sponsored and cars that I've raced. If it's not going to confuse or damage equipment, then like optimize to whatever your car's needs are.
Right, because it is that it falls back more into that mechanical gearing type thing. Just that, whatever your gearing is or however you have your thing set up, you want to make sure that you have, like you said, you don't go with too small of a tire, and now all of a sudden you're running the thing up and having to shift a whole bunch more than you need, when you could have just chosen a slightly taller tire.
Yeah, because some people might do this in a given weekend too. Like they'll run out with the dry setup, with the dry wheel and tire, and then, oh shoot, it's pouring rain, time to switch, and then they'll switch to something that's totally 30 millimeters skinnier on a different size and offset wheel, with a slightly different diameter, because they're thinking, okay, well, we're going to go at a slower speed anyways, or I want the throttle to be less jumpy on me, so they can just change wheel and tire size on the same weekend without changing the car otherwise.
Yeah,
it happens.
It's interesting. I mean, for us, like when people start saying about wheel effect, I usually end up more saying, well, if your car really is dialed enough that you're going to be concerned about which wheel size is going to make you faster, be more concerned about the wheel width that you're putting out on the front or rear of a car. And that's only because, like, the same way, obviously, wheel and tire go hand in hand, but you can change the vehicle characteristics and the handling characteristics from oversteer, understeer, whatever it may be, by just playing with the width on some of these wheels. I mean, you see it all the time with let's say a 350Z. If the car's just really snappy, if it tends to have that oversteer type feel, you can balance it out by going square instead of having that staggered stock type of fitment.
BMWs.
yeah. Or the Audi RS3s. I mean, like, even now, they from the factory, they're staggered, reverse. They do the wider wheel in the front versus the rear, to be able to make sure that they actually have the ability to oversteer and not get stuck in that understeer situation.
Yeah, and it's crazy how much just performance variances you can have in changing like what tire width you're running on the same wheel too, right?
Yeah,
Because we talked about approved rim
rim
width
width.
ranges for tires, where it could be like, oh yeah, this same tire can fit a 7.5 inch up to a 9 inch wide wheel. Like
That's
that's pretty broad,
huge. Yeah,
actually. Yeah,
that's
uh,
huge.
yeah, and it can. So like you got to think about that. Like that's a big difference for wheel sizes, and with that, you can have a big difference in performance too. So, and this kind of comes into the whole game of what your sidewall is doing on the tire, right? Because how much that tire is stretched on a different size wheel affects how much that tire is flexing, which kind of brings into the whole thing too. Like how tall of a profile do I run? Do I
Yeah,
want to run because of how flexible do I want that sidewall to be? So it's funny. It's just the rim and tire width is not everything. It's the fitment and the height of the tire, and how you expect these different aspects to affect how the tire is going to flex on how that's going to affect performance.
yeah. One of the things that uh, that I end up saying a lot, and I don't think I try to, but I end up saying it a lot, is some people think that a 255 is a 255, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure that there is a conscious effort of 255 means 255 from here to here. But when you start to look at overall like shoulder width on a tire, people talk about fitment or how something's going to fit. Not all 255 is created equally, right? Like
Of course not.
there's been a huge difference I've seen not only between manufacturers but even within model sizes within the same manufacturer, that a 255 may have an overall shoulder width that varies an inch.
Yeah. Yeah. A cool thing that Toyo does, I think most manufacturers do this actually. If you're searching for a tire, especially if you're building a car and trying to check fitments,
Yeah.
one, I see it on like Amazon and Jegs. They're actually like wheel fitment tools.
Yep.
I'm
Yep.
sure you guys are well aware. Like
Yep.
mount that up on your setup to estimate what you can actually fit under the fender of your car before you make any
Seems
buying
smart,
decisions.
doesn't it?
Yeah, measure before you purchase, right?
Yeah, right.
And then yeah, on the tire side, check the manufacturer website, because just as you say, a 275 35 18 might be a 295 from one manufacturer and it might be a 265 from another.
Yeah.
But most manufacturers should, and I know that we do, we have listed like actual inflated dimensions. And make sure you see the difference between a section width and an overall width, because
Right.
you always have that little bit of sidewall that's bulging out from the sides too.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, just knowing that stuff before you dive in is such a big deal.
While we're on the subject, kind of, if I looked at a tire that was, say, I don't know, like a 225 40 18 or something like that, and if the approved rim width for that tire is 7 to 8.5 or 7.5 to 8.5 rim width, approved rim width, is there a performance benefit or hindrance if you were to run on the lower end or the wider end of that approved rim width?
Yeah, usually they give a range of minimum and maximum, and then
Yeah.
usually there's an optimal that's bolded. So just go with the optimal one.
Okay, typically, okay.
Or at least as a starting point, right? If you decide that you're doing this on the front end and the steering feels a little bit twitchy, then it could be like, well, it's a little bit too responsive. Maybe I can go a little bit wider on it next time if I run out of room for other changes. I would rather do, I think, chassis and suspension setups before I start playing with tread section width to change the sidewall
Makes sense.
to do performance changes. But if you've got no other option, yeah, start with the optimal and then work out from there.
Cool.
It's one of those things, like so like talking about sidewall slop, quote unquote, like when you put too wide of a tire on too narrow of a bead wheel, and and then vice versa, putting too more of a stretch tire onto a bead seat, you start to really see the characteristics change from how that tire feels and its handling.
Yeah, it can make a tire, or it can make a car feel mushy when on track.
Right.
So kind of like other aspects, suspension or chassis changes, a softer can be higher grip, but it can also feel less responsive. So you turn the wheel and you feel a little bit of a delay, and then it sets, and it's like, okay, now we're hooked up. But how much did you sacrifice, like say for the S's of a track, or quick left, right, lefts, where you need that response? So if you're turning the wheel and it delays, well, then the car is not doing as much of what you want it to do when you're asking for that. So so you usually can feel these changes. I mean, same for the back end. Say you turn the wheel and then the back end kind of floats more for a minute and then it hooks up. Yeah, something's probably a little bit too soft on the back, be it suspension, sway bars, or tire. So yeah, that's often the exchange. It's just usually more rigid or stiffer, usually leads to higher response, and then softer, more malleable usually leads to slower response, but more overall grip, all within range, of course.
So let me walk this scenario through.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm buying a new wheel and tire package, I don't have any tires that I'm going to be using. And do you have can we do a very general, very broad overview of kind of where do we start, right? For example, let's do I'm going to buy a performance set of wheels. I'm going to use my car. I'm going to go on track 3 or 4 times a year. I'm going to have a spirited, fun day. What kind of tire am I looking to pair with these wheels?
I mean, first thing on our side, it's just for anybody that's tire shopping, it's load rating and speed rating. Is the tire that you're going to buy, does it have the ratings for whatever you're going to use it for, right? So does it have the capacity to hold your car up, and then some, right? Not just static, but at speed with power when you're leaning into corners. So is it rated enough for enough load? Is it rated for the speed that you plan on driving at, right? So is it W, is Y, bracket Y, any of that stuff. And then I think that's when we start digging into categories. And if it's a first timer, I think more look at the categories than the tread wear rating, because tread wear is like I said, so arbitrary. Yeah. So somebody that's jumping onto the track for the first time, like we said before, they're probably looking at a summer performance UHP or a extreme performance UHP tire. And for this stuff, it's as much as internet pundits can lead you the wrong way, there are lots of general guidelines that can lead you the right way for your platform, right? Okay. Find a good FRS forum, find a good Miata forum, find a good Porsche forum, find what the popular fitments are. That's always a great spot to at least look. And then look around for the reviews. Like Tire Rack has really good extensive reviews on different category tires. Grassroots Motorsports is another great resource for that kind of stuff. And just see what they're recommending, what they're looking for. And for any first timer, like I said, just avoid the slicks, avoid the 2-groove slicks, avoid the 100 tread wears for the most part. Find something that fits what you're looking for. But it's the safety items first, and then find what category tire you want. And then for fitments, a lot of it is just go to your shop or go to the people that do this all the time and see what works for them before diving into the unknown yourself.
Yeah, this is where it really does make a difference having a performance shop or a tuning shop or that local people that actually go to the racetrack. This is where if you really are going to be interested in actually trying to use your time, use your car, and build a car that's going to be able to perform on track, and you really are going to spend the time and the money and the effort to dedicate some of your life to racing or to track time, having people that you can be in a group with that have real, actual results that can give you real feedback and real data, it's a huge difference. Yeah. Huge difference.
Yeah. It's you go to the people that have experience to share, right? And I've seen multiple cases of somebody trying something on their car that worked for somebody else, and then they're screwed. They're like, oh, it fit on my buddy's car, why does it fit on mine? And half the time it's who knows, maybe they were running aftermarket control arm kit or something like that, or an aftermarket knuckle or upright. and it's, oh, that slightly changes the geometry, so that doesn't work on my car. It works only on theirs.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. It's like that's why for the performance aspects, driving characteristics, what to expect out of a tire or something like that, like that is great to go to, like I said, some of the magazines and reviewers that we talk about. When it comes more down to hard details on your car specifically, it's go to the shop, go to the track, find other people with setups like yours. Do a lot of research before jumping in.
I know. It's one of my biggest fears with people when they say things like, what tire size should I run, right? Like, it's because you can look up an answer and give them a technical answer. The problem is that I've seen the person that puts a 245, whatever on their STI, and then changes the tire to a 255 and is immediately like, I don't understand why this thing is rubbing so bad. And it's like, well, most likely it's not the 10 millimeters, right? It's the fact that you went from brand to brand, and the overall shoulder width is just totally different. So, like now you're having an issue that you didn't have before. And meanwhile, they're like, well, I thought you said a 255 would work. Well, yeah, but... So,
that is so much why just one change at a time, right? Because you go out to the track and you say, oh man, the car is understeering. I got to do something to fix that understeer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to soften the front bar. I'm going to soften the front shocks. I'm going to go wider on the front tires and stiffen and add some downforce to the front end too.
Oh, just a little bit.
Yeah. And let's see what happens. And all of a sudden the car is
whipping around on you
like crazy. And you're just like, well,
yeah.
Now, which of those changes affected that most?
Right. Yeah, it's hard. Well, and I think the other thing that makes it difficult is everybody wants to fast track their way to having a fast car, right? And you get into that situation where to really do it right, it requires a lot of seat time and a lot of being able to push the car into its element and kind of be able to, kind of baby step your way to success. And like, there's really no fast way to get there. You can find other things to build the gap, right?
A lot of money.
Well, no, but it's not just that. Really what you're doing is you're spending the money on people that have the experience to at least get you a really solid baseline that's really close to a finished product, but they put the seat time in.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's there's so much, like, if you want to go out to the track just to have fun and screw around, then absolutely just do mild mods on your car, run it close to stock, run a 200 tread wear or a modest like extreme performance summer tire. If you're going for lap times and you want to go faster and you want to develop your car, you got to accept just up front that it's going to take time. It's going to take lots of trial and error. It's going to take more money than you want to spend on it.
Yeah.
I don't know why we all do this, but that's the reality of it. Like every time you go to the track, with the intent of going faster, it's going to be, okay, today I'm going to try a max and minimum sway bar setting on one session and then another, see what the differences are. I'm going to measure tire temps and pressures. I'm going to collect the data and I'm going to take notes down to record my feedback. And then I'm going to try another change after that.
Yeah.
But it's a whole scientific method. If you really want to develop the car and make it faster, you got to note down every change and isolate exactly what change affects the car, negatively or positively.
Yeah. That's a good note to kind of sum up on things. Before we let you go, though, I know for a fact that there are some really cool things that are happening at Toyo. Maybe some of them you can mention, maybe some of them if you can't, but can we allude to a hint?
So right now, we actually just recently launched the Proxys R. So that's the successor to the RR tire.
Yeah.
The naming I know is kind of funny, but the simplified naming is it's foreshadowing some stuff to come.
Okay. Right.
So with the Proxys R, the new tire, it is quicker. It's got a better heat tolerance than the last one. We've done all kinds of testing with it, with some top drivers, with some club racers to get feedback from everybody. I think we've got something really cool here. It's our spec racing tire successor. But I think this new one is going to kind of open it up a little bit more so that customers outside of spec might still want to check this one out for racing or for track day use. But yeah, it's quicker, stiffer, all new compound, all new construction, a more responsive and direct tire to drive on. So I'm pretty pumped for that. Stuff that's in the pipeline. I know that a couple people I've alluded to this already, and some of these projects have been in the works for a while for some of the track day and racing crowds. It is finally happening.
That's awesome.
It's been in the works for a long while, but it is finally happening. So just keep on the lookout over the next few months, over the next few years. There's a lot of cool stuff in the works that I'm pretty pumped to have lined up for everybody.
Awesome.
You know, I want to end, but I also just had this thing that came to my head, and now I need to know.
Yeah.
Right? So we know when it comes down to actually putting something to production, like a wheel to production, we obviously, when in development, we're doing, a finite amount of testing, right? We're doing FEA or whatever it may be. We do that endlessly in different cycles, different test simulations. We're using impact tests, rolling tests, bending tests. We're doing all sorts of these things to make sure that the design itself is completely structural sound and it's going to hold up to what we want to throw at it. Obviously, then the wheel actually gets done, and we're going to put it through all the real physical tests to make sure that this thing is absolutely where we simulated it to be. When it comes down to tires, let's say you get done with the tire, you do all this testing. Is there room to go back and actually modify something before it goes to production if, like, let's say they're not getting the results that they want?
Oh yeah. The tire developments are a long process, unfortunately, but at the same time, it's because there's so much testing and development that goes into it. So yeah, like I got to visit some of our test labs and facilities over in Japan not long ago too, and it's really cool to see. There's all kinds of stuff there to just test and simulate every situation that's going to be thrown at these tires. And so when it comes to developing a new product, they'll say, hey, we've got these couple different options sometimes, and try them on some different cars, try them at some different tracks. We'll try it in real world scenarios, and punish them until there's absolutely nothing left. Collect data on how it wore throughout. Check every so often throughout the entire life of the tire. How did the driver feel about it? How did the car respond? How is the tire acting? How does the tire look? How's the temperatures and all that? And sometimes if we've got multiple specs that we're checking out, we could be like, this one sucked, this was good, here's why, and then run that back, do it all over again, and there can be a bit of a lengthy process. And so it's funny, sometimes the designs or even patterns that we discuss in meetings or play around with at the track, sometimes it's completely different from the final product. So it makes me think, I don't think we test our stuff in any public setting I can think of, but like when a manufacturer, an OE, puts out a concept car and people look at it and be like, oh, what design hints are going to be carried over to the new tire? I just think about, with some prototypes or development projects, if anybody ever spots something in the wild being tested, I kind of feel like, yeah, it's cool. We'll see what they're playing with, but that could be the final version, or it could be a complete opposite of what that looks like.
Yeah, for sure. That's great. That's crazy. It's just, sorry, I didn't mean to derail our ending, but it's hard. It's like, we know how long things can be in a pipeline for, and then to know that like there's so much testing that goes into, especially tires, and so many different variables, whether it be compounds or, rubber makeup or different things like that. So to know that like there is that point where even if it's not what they want, they'll go back to the drawing board a little bit and they'll kind of flip the script and come back with something that's more in tune with what they're looking for.
Yeah, that kind of stuff happens because and even after a tire goes to market, you always learn, right? Once the mass consumer have their hands on it. So we do all kinds of research. We pull data from everywhere we can. We do surveys. We check in. I show up to the events, checking in on people, and try to find out like is there anything we need to address on the next iteration? Because we're always looking for improvements that way.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, Cameron, thank you for taking some time out of your day to come on and grace us with the presence of real racers with real tire experience, so we could stop answering the question with "it depends."
Yes.
I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Oh man. Well, so So that was a good one. Look, I think that we get a lot of questions from you guys about tires. Hopefully this gave you a little bit of insight. I know that it's like there's so many questions about tires.
Right.
I mean, we could do this probably all day, but I think that there, really some key takeaways are, you got to be careful about making sure that you're picking what's right for you. Don't take off more than you can chew, making sure that you're kind of looking for the general consensus and trying to take advantage of experience that came before you with a similar car and similar platform, a similar setup. And then finally, I think, you want to make sure that, you're really considering all the functions and uses that you're going to put a tire through so that you're pairing it correctly. And if you, jump around too much, this is not a situation where the more money you have, the best tire you're going to get is going to translate to a faster lap time. Not necessarily anyway, right?
Right.
So it was cool to hear, a real tire expert give us a lot of the information. And Cameron, like I said, has a really decorated racing history. Yeah. So that comes with not only, the technical stuff that comes from behind the scenes of being a manufacturer, yep, but also from being an actual racer that has all that seat time. So
yeah,
it was good. Anyhow, thanks for hanging out with us. We'll catch you on the next one.